Welcome to the Interzone Roadmap Pitstop February 2019 edition. This month, I talk with CJ Tan, Principal Program Manager on the SharePoint engineering team, about all things file hover cards. Consider this the message center for everyone, not just for cloud admins. We'll keep you informed, current, and ahead of the ever-curving Microsoft 365 roadmap. We've got a lot of items to cover. 2019 is off to the races. Get ready to punch the pedal to the metal. Buckle up, Punxsutawney Phil. Here comes the light shining on your groundhog shadowing, and it looks like another 6 weeks of roadmap goodness. We've bucketed this episode into distinct sections, like the 4 G-force turning turns of the racetrack. Each turn is a pull of at least 10 Gs towards the future, and the future is now. Let's go. Employee engagement. This is where you want to spread your message throughout the entire intranet. And I want to start this section by telling you that something is actually shipped, something that we actually mentioned on a previous roadmap pit stop. That is the mega menus. SharePoint mega menus, site footers, and headers are now actually truly really rolling out. I did mention this previously and made a note in the blog, but I wanted to let you know it's true. It's really rolling out to targeted release customers in Office 365. So starting this month, we're actually removing the product feedback button from the site footer of all SharePoint home and modern site pages. Customer feedback certainly continues to help us prioritize our work, and we're working on adding a new way for you to send us feedback from the navigation bar in the coming months. Next up is what we're doing next with the SharePoint migration tool. This is a tool that you'll see improvements to pretty much every month or at least every quarter. And there's a couple of big significant improvements this month in February. First is you can now bring the managed metadata service that you've built on premises in SharePoint Server 2013 and use the SharePoint migration tool to now migrate your content types and term stores to Office 365. Global term store migration requires global tenant admin permissions. But that's not all. The SharePoint migration tool also has a couple of nice updates. We now support the ability to bring on-premises SharePoint web parts, things like blog, chart viewer, content search, list form, list view media. There's a whole list of all the web parts that we support. We'll put a link in the show notes so you can see every web part from on-premises that's supported to move and migrate using the SharePoint migration tool. We also now support the ability to migrate navigation and icons, along with site descriptions and pages, including those pages in the asset library, all can now be migrated. The SharePoint migration tool, as you can imagine, brings just about every element of SharePoint sites that you care most about, now including web parts, pages, and site navigation. Okay, on to turn number 2, one that collaborates spin-style G-forces like a James Bond villain's evil centrifuge chamber trap. That's right. Get your Q gadgets ready to start the turbine engine in the G-forces going around the turns. That's right. Here we go. Here we are at Teamwork. Teamwork is where, of course, we provide out-of-box wonderful experiences for people to work together collaboratively every day. The first couple of things are what we're doing inside of SharePoint lists. These are all rolling out in February. First, bulk check-in and check-out. You'll be able to check in and check out multiple files at the same time from the modern command bar in the document library. Signals. Signals are a great way of adding visual cues about the status of a file, such as checkouts, sharing, DLP blocks, or missing metadata to modern views. We'll also have column totals. You'll be able to display column totals and subtotals in the footer of a group or a list or a library view. You'll now be able to add columns between columns. You can insert new columns in place between existing columns in a modern list or a library view. And last, you'll be able to drag and drop columns. If you need to move a column around in a list or library, you can drag the column header to a new location in the view, save that view, and you're set. Lots and lots of great things that you can do with lists and libraries, and these are all now available in this new motion and move to modern. What you could do in Classic, you can now do in Modern. A lot of great innovations in that space. Let's take a pause on the roadmap and pull into the pit stop to chat with one of our SharePoint engineers who is actively releasing an important feature out into production, Office 365. and who manages a key aspect of keeping you informed when you're working with your files. Stay tuned. We'll be talking with CJ Tan, Principal Program Manager on the SharePoint engineering team. So we are in Building 34, and we're here with CJ Tan, who is a Principal Program Manager on the SharePoint team, who's done a lot of wonderful things, and we'll get into a bit of your background. But just in your own words, who is CJ and what are some of the things you're working on right now?
So I'm, like you mentioned, a principal program manager, and I've been on the OneDrive and SharePoint team for about 5 years now. I started actually working on OneDrive and specifically the consumer app around their photos, what I like to call the productive camera roll scenarios around that, doing a lot of photos intelligence. And I moved over to SharePoint a couple of years ago and started working more on enterprise solutions, specifically around files and how they fit into OneDrive and SharePoint together.
Nice. And I think when you and I first crossed paths a couple of years ago, you were starting to take ownership of some of the site activities with the new site usage page.
That's right, yeah.
And so I know that's evolved, and I actually think it kind of hints into what we want to talk about with you today, which is the new file hover experience, card hover experience.
Yeah, I mean, knowing what's happening on your site or your file or any of the work that you're doing or contributing to an intranet is really important, and that's what that site activity is doing, and also the file card.
Nice. So there's a common experience when somebody goes to either learn more about a person or learn more about a file. With their mouse, they hover over it, and up pops what we call either a people card or a file hover card.
Yeah.
And in that, you guys are programming a really nice experience of what you want to learn about that person or file. What is the philosophy or the sort of the design aspect? What are you guys thinking about based on usage, feedback, whatnot? What's in that file hover experience?
Well, ultimately, what we want the file card to do is help you stay on top of what your work is. Things that you're working on, the things that you're important to. And we realize that a lot of times you don't need to open the entire file, or sometimes it's really cumbersome to get to it. So what we want is this really lightweight way for you to interact with a file and get really critical information. So insights on the file that you could either take action on. So if you think about seeing how many people have viewed the file, seeing who has viewed the file will help you decide if you need to contact somebody or reach out to somebody for more feedback. Or if you've never seen a file before, just know something about it before you actually open it and see whether or not you should spend your time reading it.
There's always that, do I commit to opening this? Part of it is just what is in this file? What is it about?
Right.
But then there's also the activity around it, which I think for both the people cards and the file hover experience, it's that window into, is this worth my time?
Correct.
And you're using the real data on the file. What is the design of the actual card that pops up? And for this feature, how do you leverage what makes for a good experience or good design? And then we'll get into sort of the tech behind it.
All right. Well, we did actually, the concept of a card existed before the file card. So we looked really closely at what the people card was doing and how that interaction with and the timing for hovering. And knowing that that's a pattern that is actually fairly understood, not just in the intranet, like with our apps, but really across the internet as well. Like hovering over something is an action that people recognize. So we decided to use that as a way to not be intrusive. There's a lot of information that you could put on the screen, and so this is even richer information on one specific item. So we thought that hover experience would actually be the best way to interact with it. And then we followed the patterns of how it opens. First, you'll notice like it opens with just a peek, because it could just be very quickly, you can get a snapshot of what's going on. And if you hover a little bit longer, the card expands and you see actually a lot richer information there that you can take additional actions on.
And what are those? Maybe explain what that experience is.
So specifically for OneDrive, your files in OneDrive, actually on both OneDrive and SharePoint files, when you start to hover over it, we do show you just the counts initially. So it's like a summary of all the activities that have been happening. And when you hover for a little bit longer, we'll actually tell you what life cycle signal is on. That's one of the things that is rolling out in February. And then that gives you a little more information about what's happening. And now if that file belongs to you and it's in your OneDrive, we'll actually also show you the people that looked at it. And that, of course, is really important, especially for a file you've shared, gives you immediate feedback about what's happening on that file or who's looked at it and when they looked at it.
And that's based on view, that's based on edit if they were able to edit. Is there anything around if the content was shared or other activities?
So at this point, we're not counting like if it's been reshared or anything like that. But what we do look at is when it's on a page, the number of likes we're going to be counting, as well as the comments that are actually on that as well. So you can really kind of get a snapshot initially and then look at what types of interactions have been happening. And this is a little bit different from what you see on the details pane, because as we know, if you open up the details pane of a file, you'll see like basically a captain's log of all the activity. What we're trying to capture in the file card is really a summary of the insightful things, the things that you can take action on when you look at it without having to open it further. And what's important about that is in cases where the file card, because it's part of the new file browsing experience, it means that it can exist outside, just like the people card, outside of OneDrive and SharePoint, which means that you might not want to have this big details pane experience. You've kind of just got the top things that are happening on the activity.
So if I heard you correctly, when we talk about a consistent files experience across Office 365, that means a lot of things. It means your views. That means if you want to pin a content to the top of a document library. But ultimately it means, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm in the files view of a SharePoint document library through Microsoft Teams, which is the Files tab,
right.
Once that's fully rolled out, one of the things that will come along, if I hover over a file within the Teams UI,
right.
I would see that new hover card experience.
Yeah. And any app can decide to do that. So Teams will have the capability to turn that on because they've integrated it with our files browser. So it's a really powerful way to allow the same functionality across any app.
So shared controls, but ultimately what we hope is a benefit of the service all up is the content is stored in a central location that's based on SharePoint, and the experiences you're building on top of that, of course, are what makes sense for what people are asking for, and the insights, which is also based, I think, on a little bit of our artificial intelligence or the AI side of SharePoint and OneDrive. Which is, I think, if we can give a little teaser of not just what's happening in February of 2019, but where are we going next?
Right. So what we'll see in February, a lot of it is what happened to the file that is going to help me take my next action. And the next action is really around collaboration, because we're doing views and we're doing edits, and we're really prompting you to take your next action. All the features that are coming out in February are really around getting you to collaborate more, giving you feedback on something that you've shared, possibly a file that you've known about. The new things coming forward is really about, what is this file about? Is it worth my time to read? Should I open it now? And more importantly, could I open it later? Because I've got other things to look at in the moment.
It's nice. So it's building off of, we've got the basis of having a really rich search index, and we've got the value of the Microsoft Graph, which is telling me who you are, what you're interested in. And at the file level, as the file hover card experience starts to inherit some of that intelligence, it's starting to promote things that are possibly 3, 4, 20 pages into the document, but have been derived to be of interest or useful, right?
Yeah, that's cool. Exactly it.
That's really cool.
So it's really extending the usefulness of the card from that perspective.
The thing I really love about the experience that you've built is it does it all in the context of where I was. So I want to learn more, it pops up, I review, I can commit to learn more, but then once it goes away, I'm right back to where I was. I didn't go to a different app. I didn't go to a different website.
We want to keep you in context with what you're working as well. And that's the part of the card as well, is it's really about showing you information that is personalized to you. As we get more sophisticated with things, it may change. Like your view of the card might be different from mine. Actually, a good example of that now is a file that belongs to me will have a different view. I'll be able to see the viewers, whereas if you look at that same card, you won't be able to see the viewers. So there's an element of personalization around the card as well.
Cool. Well, as we lead up to the SharePoint conference in May, a couple months away, my bet is that people can expect to hear a lot more in this area. Obviously, because we've got a lot of news coming. I hope you're excited to share more with the world.
Yeah, I mean, really the direction that we want to take the card is to provide you with more insights, either feedback or acknowledgement of the work that you've done, or summarizing and highlighting activity or details over time. But ultimately, that should naturally lead you to take an action. And the next step of the card is to help you take those actions. So again, you don't have to leave where you're working to do that. We kind of have an example of that right now with our life cycles. So for example, if a life cycle signal says, this file is checked out and I'm the one that checked it in, I can take that action right on the card. I don't have to go and open the file and check it back in, that sort of idea. So we're really wanting to move more of these personalized actions to the card.
So, as you see people actually using the technology, both in the iteration of today and things that come out tomorrow, you're tracking that and what people are using. What are some of the things that you've done based on the actual use of the file hover cards?
Well, for one, the file hover card in its first version actually only appeared for Office files. So their Word documents, your PowerPoint, your PDFs. And so we got a lot of feedback that, people store way more file types than just Office files. So we have activated the card so that it appears and collects stats on non-Office file types. And the other thing that we heard was it's great that we could count views for people inside my organization, but what's really important to me is to get that feedback when I send something or share something to an external user to know when it's been viewed or how popular it is. So we've also now are starting view counts for anonymous and guest users. And again, if you've got that file on OneDrive and it belongs to you, you'll also be able to see when an anonymous person has viewed the file.
So what you're telling me is you're actually building and tailoring the service based on not just how people use it, but based on feedback?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Feedback-driven service. That's amazing. So of all the things that you put out there in the world or wherever your team has a center of gravity, where can we go to learn more about what you and your team are doing?
You can definitely ask any question that you want on the tech community. And we posted blogs around the file card itself. And so that's the best place to reach me.
Excellent. Well, we'll put a link into the show notes for that specific article. Thank you, CJ, for all the work that you do. And obviously, thank you for taking time in the Roadmap Pitstop to share what you've been doing with the file hover cards and way beyond for all the work that you do.
Thanks, Mark. This was fun.
Thank you for your time, CJ, and thank you for the ongoing engineering excellence. We'll see you at the SharePoint conference in May. Now let's get back on the track and crank some more G-forces through midway of the teamwork turn. First up, we're going to dive right into what we were talking about with CJ. File hover cards are getting smarter, and now they're available for all file types. The file card is great at giving you a quick peek at your most important files, and it's getting even better. As soon as you hover your mouse over a file, you'll be able to see file details like access stats, number of views, who's viewed, who modified, and starting this month, we're adding file card support for all types of file types, not just core Office files. You'll see that the file card will now appear for files listed on your Shared by Me view, which expands the scope of where you're going to discover and see more information about your files when you hover on them. The next area is actually outside of SharePoint currently, but we want to enable this same capability over time in more places. The Office Applications team just announced the ability to safeguard sensitive data consistently across Mac, iOS, and Android. To help protect sensitive data consistently across various platforms, Microsoft announced the information protection capabilities that enable users to classify content and apply labels to documents and emails directly from Office applications on Mac, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook, and Office Mobile, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel on iOS and Android. Now, this lays a nice foundation for in the future when sensitivity labels apply to containers like SharePoint document libraries. You can create sensitivity labels and associate them with policies in the new Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center. You can then apply these labels to files, emails, groups, sites, and teams to automatically enforce consistent policies across your content. Safeguard your sensitive data no matter what device you're on and no matter where the content is stored. Here we are at turn number 3. The engine is running hot. Wipe away those beads of sweat and peer over your steering wheel at a few related technologies shipped in February of 2019. Related technologies, things that we love, things that we integrate with, things that we think you should know about. First up, self-service migration from Office 365 Video to Microsoft Stream. Question is, are you ready to opt in? If the answer is yes, you should know you can do this today. You can move your videos, channels, admin settings, and any links to Office 365 Video will automatically redirect to the migrated content in Stream. This accrues a ton of goodness for SharePoint pages and news. Once you're migrated over to Microsoft Stream, you'll have the full power at your fingertips. That brings speech-to-text transcription, improved playback, face detection, enhanced in-player search, and so much more. So that's a lot of goodness. Opt in, move to Microsoft Stream, and accrue a lot of great value to what you can do with your videos on SharePoint pages, sites, and news. Next is all about OneDrive. The OneDrive sync client now has a prompt if you by accident do a mass deletion of content. So now, whenever someone deletes more than 200 synced OneDrive or TeamSite files at once from their device, the OneDrive sync client will prompt the user to confirm if it was intentional. If it was accidental, the user can easily tap Restore Files and bring them back, just like that. This next one is something that we want you to put as a task for you to do because it's all about team tasks. That's right. Planner now has the ability to create multiple plans for one individual Office 365 group. And that makes sense if you want to leverage those plans then inside of SharePoint. You can have a team that manages multiple plans. And of course, those multiple plans can be associated to not just the members, but to that directly connected SharePoint team site. So when you create a new plan, select Add to an existing Office 365 group, and then select the existing group and start assigning tasks. Rounding out the team workspace, there are some new improvements to when you scan using the OneDrive mobile app. OneDrive leverages the power of Microsoft Office Lens to capture the physical elements like receipts and whiteboards and puts them into an easy-to-read PDF format. OneDrive now offers the ability to choose the save location from anywhere in your OneDrive or the SharePoint sites that you have access to. Give it a name, fill out the metadata if the SharePoint document library requires it, all before you upload so it's intact from day one. Okay. Final turn, time to look a little further down the road and past the finish line. Let's talk about 2 items coming in March of 2019. Teasers. What's coming in March? What is coming in March? Thing number 1, Microsoft Stream and PowerPoint are bringing their technologies together so that you can add a Microsoft Stream video directly inside of PowerPoint. The next time you've got a great presentation that includes a video, put it in the right place. When you click into that next slide, you'll see a beautiful streaming video from Microsoft Stream. Thing number 2 is we're bringing the Custom Learning Center in Office 365. This is a ready-to-go template full of Office 365 training modules delivered from the cloud in the context of your Office 365 tenant. This was originally disclosed as the Microsoft Training Services at the SharePoint Conference 2018. It'll be a wonder portfolio for all customers' intranets. That's it with the teasers. We're close to the end of the pit stop. Let's apply the brakes a little and cover the important resources that are always available to you throughout the year. Now, we'd like to make sure you have a good list of resources to turn to throughout the year. We'll put a bunch of important links in the show notes. These will take you to learn more about the Message Center, the Microsoft 365 Public Roadmap, our own SharePoint community blog, and all things Twitter. All the places you need to get up to speed, to stay up to speed, and of course, to stay and get ahead. We hope it's been a nice, smooth, speedy ride hearing of all the things that rolled out in February 2019. Thank you for enduring all those tight turns and burns of rubber, so many G's. Thank you for turning into this episode of the InterZone Roadmap Pit Stop February 2019. Stay engaged, ask questions, push us to get the best information and insights that you need. We are here to put our and your best change management foot forward. Stay safe out there on the roadmap. Till next month, thanks for listening.